Okay, well, it looks like we have about 80 folks, and we'll just get started, and more may join us. Again, my name is Meg Ryan with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you all virtually being here to have a virtual meeting on virtual meetings. So that is probably our new reality. I do have you all on mute, so I'm kind of the queen here that I can mute and unmute you. And what we've learned from some of our past experience with this, and we're getting better, we're learning with you, is that we will try to use the chat box. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, there should be a chat icon, and we will use that to navigate questions and answers. If we have about 80 folks, if we dwindle toward the end, we'll do a question and answer, and we'll just let you ask your question. Today's purpose is to try to figure out some solution and tools to these electronic meetings. We all are faced with this sort of new reality, and we may be moving to kind of a hybrid in the future of how we engage the public for our council meetings, our planning commission meetings, any other virtual types of experiments. So we're going to start off with talking about solution and tools that we've sort of garnered with the assistance of Salt Lake City. And then we're going to turn to two planning commissioner and county commissioner perspectives across the state. And then we will also open it up to question and answers to get your ideas and thoughts as we navigate this. I don't know how many of you were able to join the earlier national webinar on this topic, which was somewhat interesting. It will be recorded, and we will post that on our website along with this recording, as well as resources. If everyone's been able to find their chat box, I have posted a link here to a Google document where Jordan has, and I'll introduce Jordan in a second, but Jordan has put together a resource document for you where the materials that we talk about today are included, as well as some other links to help you navigate and figure out resources. We are privileged to partner today with the Utah APA. We have Angela Price, who represents them on the legislative team, and she also works for Salt Lake City in the housing department. And then Jordan Katcher, who's with the Utah Community Development Office. They are my co-hosts today, so thank you, ladies. And we will start by turning it over to Angela, and she will talk a little bit about some of the changes and then hand it over to her colleague. Angela?
Thanks, Meg, and thanks to the League and DWS for partnering with the American Planning Association Utah chapter on this training here this afternoon. As Meg said, I am co-chair with my good buddy Wilf Summercorn, who is on this call as well, of the APA Legislative Committee. And my day job is with Salt Lake City. I'm a program and policy manager in the Housing and Neighborhood Development Division. I'm happy to be with you here today to give you a quick overview of the Open Public Meetings Act. Just want to let you know that a copy of these slides are included in the Google Doc, along with a copy of the governor's executive order. As you all know, the Open Public Meeting Act is the state code that governs how we host public meetings as city councils, planning commissions. And that title of code that governs those responsibilities is Title 52, Chapter 4. Most of us, if we are running those public meetings, are very familiar with that section of code. What the governor did on March 18th is issued an executive order that basically allows for some provisions to be changed in the Open Public Meetings Act. Meg, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. What's not required now until we are not in an emergency declaration is that you don't have to post a written notice at your building or where the meeting will be held any longer. You don't have to post a written notice in an anchor location. You don't have to establish one or more anchor locations for the public meeting or provide a space for physical meeting. Additionally, if you're accepting comments, you don't have to provide a space or at your building or an anchor location that residents can physically attend. Again, this is so that we can practice safe social distancing and follow the governor's orders to stay home, stay safe. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Meg. What is required is that you need to provide a means by which the public may remotely hear or observe the live meeting by audio or video transmission. If you're accepting comments, you need to find a way for the public to comment and ask questions. You also need to adopt, if you haven't already, a resolution, rule, or ordinance governing electronic meetings pursuant to the executive order. Again, this is in effect until the termination of the state of emergency declaration. As I said, when I started, the emergency order of the governor is included in the Google Doc that was in the chat box. And then this presentation, along with all of the materials, will be posted on the APA Utah website, along with the League's website. So with that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Christiana. She is originally from Pocatello. She's also a planner. She's worked with numerous nonprofits and is a new member of Salt Lake City's civic engagement team, who as a staff in Salt Lake, we're so grateful for because they've been doing such amazing outreach work for us. With that, I will let Christiana go into the wonderful guide that her team has put together that we've shared with you today. Thank you.
And then just, I wanted to, I might interrupt here. Hopefully it won't be too awkward, but this is part of our practice. But we did have a question coming up on the OPMA slide, Angela, about whether the chair of the planning commission was required to be present at the anchor location. And I answered that on the chat, but you do not. That was part of the provisions that we had amended in this amended OPMA provision.
That is correct.
Sorry, Christiana.
No worries. Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. And maybe I'll let Meg, if you can go over to the engagement guide, I can start talking about that.
Excellent. You can go ahead while I bring it up. Sorry.
Okay, sounds good. So anyway, yeah, thank you so much again for the introduction. And I just want to also just echo what was said earlier about just being grateful. Thank you for organizing this webinar. I'm glad that this guide can hopefully be helpful to kind of a wider audience than we originally intended it, just to help Salt Lake City departments, community councils, but I'm glad that it can get a bigger reach. So again, I'm Christiana Johnson. I work for Salt Lake City the Civic Engagement team. And so I'm going to be covering information from this guide that we put together called Best Practices for Engagement in the Time of COVID. Yeah, you can stop right there. Yeah, just with the introduction, perfect. And the link to this guide will also be posted, but it is just on the slc.gov website. But I wanted to go over this introduction, basically just saying that COVID-19 has clearly changed all of our lives in really profound ways in a really short amount of time, and public participation and public engagement also have clearly changed. Has been an almost instantaneous switch to exclusive online engagement, online meetings. And so this guide is really meant as a way to give some resources about how to navigate this new normal of engagement. And we focus mostly on the online engagement, but there's also some tips at the end about navigating the digital divide and trying to do some traditional but adapted engagement during this time also. But for this webinar, for my presentation right today, I'm just going to be focusing on the online engagement. And first, I just want to also acknowledge and thank the engagement professionals around the world for their contributions included in this guide, specifically members of IAP2, which is the International Association for Public Participation in the USA and Canada. Much of this guide includes information from those professionals and from webinars that occurred in early to mid-March as we were kind of navigating this and learning how to navigate it. So a lot of it is from those webinars, and we actually link to those webinars at the end of the guide. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to that. And yep, perfect. You can stay on this for a second. Like I said, this guide goes over online engagement, online meetings, and online outreach platforms and methods, but it also briefly talks about some ways to address traditional engagement during this time too. And again, there are resources at the end. So you can go to the next page, Meg. Yeah, we're just trying to, again, navigate this new normal with this guide. So yep, and you can stop here, perfect. So this guide briefly goes over engagement planning, which some of you might already know. We've adapted a lot of these from, again, IAP2, the International Association for Public Participation. I encourage you to look more into that. And we also have just a general engagement guide that we created a couple years ago that, before all of this, that has a little bit more information about this. But here we just go over the IAP2 engagement spectrum, which starts at informing the public and then goes to consult, involve, and collaborate based on the scope of the project and how much you need to talk to the public. And we give some examples here of, proposing a change to street lane markings, to proposing a roundabout, to writing a master plan, things like that. But basically, no matter what, good quality engagement with the public follows the same principles, whether online or offline. And communities work best when residents, businesses, and institutions are engaged and working together. The goal is always to improve outreach and participation for better informed decision-making. You can go to the next page, Meg. Okay, or yeah, just maybe right here. Yep, perfect. The online, yeah, perfect. So as I mentioned before, we've basically been experiencing an overnight shift to conduct almost all engagement online. And speaking from the perspective of Salt Lake City, we've definitely been adapting as best we can with Facebook Live virtual open houses, virtual city council meetings, but still following the open meetings requirements that Angela just discussed. And Mayor Mendenhall has been doing a lot of social media updates with the public, which I think has been really helpful for a lot of people to kind of stay in the loop about what's happening in this time when, one day we're experiencing COVID-19 and the next day we're having an earthquake. So it's really, the benefit of having these instant updates is really important. But anyway, here, this guide has compiled a lot of these innovative new ways and tips to reach members of the public. So with online meetings, some things to keep in mind include having a call-in option for people that don't have access to a computer, establishing online discussion guidelines, like having all participants keep their video on but mute themselves unless they're speaking, things like that. That just makes it a little bit smoother as you run the meeting. We've listed some kind of traditional ground rules for meetings here because those obviously still are helpful and apply. Things like respecting each other and keeping the conversation productive. And then if you want to scroll down a little bit, Meg. Yep, perfect. This is good. And then it's also helpful to assign roles for the meeting beforehand, having a facilitator, a tech lead, a note taker. And it's helpful to if you have time, and depending on the size of the group, you can start the meeting with a check-in. If you scroll down a little bit, Meg. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so here, oh, sorry, yep, go up a little bit up, sorry. Perfect, okay, yeah, so right there, yeah, keeping in mind for large meetings, that, you know, it's a little bit more difficult to have everybody talking and screen sharing with a huge group. But if you have a smaller group, maybe you can actually just have everyone verbally check in and share their screen and talk, if it's a smaller meeting. So it definitely depends. But again, these kind of basic tips of having the roles for the meeting, and having guidelines can go a long way. And this webinar is kind of a good model of that, because we did a tech run through, 30 minutes before the meeting. That's always a good idea. Meg, if you want to scroll up a little bit, just so this graphic, so you can see this whole graphic, the like hosted back channel, that, yep, up, yep, perfect, right there, yeah. So we have this graphic here that kind of shows the traditional process for meetings, and then corresponding steps to kind of take now that we're doing all this virtually. So being clear about technology requirements, ensuring that technology meets privacy requirements, doing a test run, having a team to deal with kind of tech issues in the moment, things like that. All of that can really help make these meetings run a lot smoother. And then on the left side, you can see this paragraph about Zoom meetings, this in the left middle of the page. So we kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about Zoom bombing, which probably a lot of you have heard of, or hopefully you haven't experienced it. But this is when uninvited attendees break into and disrupt a meeting. And so it's good to keep in mind that for Zoom meetings in general, and especially if you're hosting, open public meetings on Zoom, it's important to disable a lot of features to prevent people from kind of hijacking the meeting. And then Meg, if you want to scroll down now and go to the green box that says Zoom tips. Yeah, perfect, right there. Yeah, so we have kind of the steps laid out for how to disable all those features, to make sure that people cannot take over the meeting like that. All right, great. And then now you can scroll down a little bit more to the equity section. Perfect. So it's also important to consider equity and accessibility as much as possible with online meetings. So it's good to think about recording the meetings so people can, and then sending it out to people so they can watch it on their own time. I know a lot of requirements of government public meetings, it has to be recorded, but just in general, I think that's a good practice to have it recorded so people can watch it later. Thinking about translating it into relevant languages, if that's needed, providing subtitles and closed captioning for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. There's a lot of things to consider with that. So we've linked to a couple of resources here to learn about web accessibility, and how to make that a part of your process for online meetings. And now you can scroll down to the online outreach platforms. Perfect. Yeah, that's good. As I said before, Salt Lake City is really doing our best to adapt by using new online platforms and outreach methods. Here there's just a list of various platforms with examples of each related to Salt Lake City, as much as possible. And a lot of these innovative social media platforms have been working really well. Like I said before, Salt Lake City has been doing these virtual Facebook Live open houses. And we actually, you could click on some of these links to see some of them, or you can kind of look at it on your own time. But just last week, Salt Lake City hosted a COVID-19 Facebook Live workshop that had thousands of people watch and had hundreds of people comment and ask questions live. So that was a really good way to get to answer questions that people have been having in that way. But yeah, there's a lot of other great examples of using Instagram Live and Instagram stories, of using Twitter, Nextdoor, Reddit, a lot of these platforms, just to connect to as many residents as possible about all the projects and that Salt Lake City is working on. There's maps are also a really great tool, maps and story maps. I'm not sure if people have seen the John Hopkins story map of COVID, but I know that's another tool that a lot of local governments are using more now too, to kind of get information across virtually, and that's a great tool as well. And you can scroll down a little bit to the virtual meeting platforms. Yep, that's good. Okay. So we also list kind of some of the most popular virtual meeting platforms along with some of their pros and cons. So for instance, some have better interfaces and some have polling features. You can share the screen easily and see chat comments easily. And you can save the chat comments more easily in some of them, which is also helpful. To save all of that from meetings. But there's a lot of things that you can kind of consider when looking to get a virtual meeting platform. Some have, the ability to do breakout sessions. Like I know with Zoom, a premium Zoom account, you can have a large webinar like this and then send everyone into, breakout rooms of 2 to 3 people for kind of smaller group discussions, which can be helpful depending on the project. But really, I mean, it obviously comes down to cost, to thinking about screen sharing and recording capabilities, ability to host those discussions, small group discussions, security features, and simplicity to access. So we have some of the kind of the best features of virtual meeting tools to think about when you're looking into that. Okay, and now you can scroll down again. Okay, yep, on that graphic, that's great. So yeah, and we again kind of show the IAP2 engagement spectrum from inform to collaborate, but we also list all the kind of online tools that you can use to do all of those things. So like I said, the Facebook Live is a great way to inform people of a project. You can answer questions, but that's probably the extent of what you can use that for. To actually consult with people, you can do an online survey. I know Salt Lake City has been doing a lot of surveys lately online to get people's feedback on different projects. But there's a lot of other resources out there and online platforms out there to kind of figure out how to do engagement now moving forward. In this new time, and I won't list all of them, but again, yeah, there's a lot of examples there of how you can do it. And then if you want to scroll down a little bit, Meg, to the bridging the digital divide, yep, that's good. Yeah, like I said before, the bulk of this guide is talking about the online engagement, and that's really what I'm focusing on talking about today, but we do include some information and some resources about bridging the digital divide, because it is something important to consider, the fact that not everyone in our communities have access to devices and the internet when we're doing this engagement. So as much as possible, again, things like having a call-in option and having options for people to engage by phone is a good thing to consider now that we're doing the bulk of our, the vast majority of our engagement online. And then if you want to go down, we have some examples of traditional outreach methods of, going back to using hotlines and phone trees, using text message services, just mailers if you have the budget for that, obviously. And then just partnering with local organizations and nonprofits to get the word out as well. And then, if you want to, go to the resources and stop there, that's good. Yeah, great. And so then at the very end, like I said, we have this list of all these other great resources that are out there to kind of help navigate engagement, whether it's the GovTech resource guide is for government leaders about how to do engagement in this time. There's a local action tracker where you can see what different local governments are doing. There's a lot of digital divide resources here, and again, since IAP2, we used a lot of their great resources throughout this guide, but they have so many other resources. We just linked to theirs as well, that they have a great compilation of resources of what to do in this time. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I just want to say, in conclusion, I just want to say that there is not one right way to do this. You know, it's obviously a really challenging time for all of us, and especially for government leaders, to figure out how to do engagement now. I heard recently, I thought it was a really good way to approach it, is that there's no magic bullet, that the most effective approach is more like magic buckshot, meaning it takes several different approaches working together to get through this. And I think that's true. And it's just good to keep in mind that it's okay to fail and learn from mistakes, and that we just need to be patient and flexible with technology, yourself, and others, because we're all learning and adapting, and we're all in this together. So that's all I have, but thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And in the chat box, if you are able to find that, hopefully, there is a link to all the resources that you've just seen. We've compiled that on a Google Doc along with other resources. And now I'll turn it over to Jordan.
Thank you, Meg. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Jordan Katcher, and I'm with the state's Community Development Office. We are based out of Salt Lake City, and I just wanted to share a little bit about our office, just in case we have resources that would be applicable to your needs. First and foremost, we support regional planners throughout 5 association of governments. So not WFRC or MAG, but we directly fund regional planners. And so if you have any planning issues or struggles that you're having, we always encourage that you reach out to those regional planners. Similarly, we also run a Rural Coordinating Council, which is a group of service providers from federal and state agencies, universities, nonprofits. We're all service providers to rural Utah, and we try to communicate better with each other and collaborate on projects. So if you are interested in what resources those providers have, definitely reach out to us. And then lastly, we also have tools, guides, and resources that we have compiled. So whether you are updating your general plan or working through short-term rentals, we have a bunch of tools and resources for you. So definitely reach out to us afterward, and we can get you linked up with those resources. So next I'm going to segue. We've got 2 guest speakers with us today. The first is Scott Hess, Kaysville Planning Commissioner. I'd like to share a little introduction about Scott and then have him take the floor. So Scott grew up and continues to live in Davis County, Utah. He has been a Kaysville Planning Commissioner since the 1st of this year, and he has participated in a handful of meetings so far. His experience as a planning commissioner is much different than his role as a professional planner, where he has over 10 years of experience working on the staff side of planning and city council meetings. In his spare time, Scott loves to be outdoors and riding bikes with his family, which includes his wife. He has twins that are 4 years old and also a 9-month-old daughter. And although he will not brag about it, he likes to ride dirt jumps on his BMX bike, and he has some of the best turndowns in the history of Rad Dads. So Scott, I will let you take the floor and talk about Kaysville Planning Commission going virtual.
Well, thank you very much, Jordan. I really appreciate that, and thanks for the kind words. So a little more about that introduction. So yes, I'm a planning commissioner for Kaysville City. In my professional life now, I get to be the community and economic development director at Wasatch Front Regional Council. So our customer base is 5 counties across northern Utah: Salt Lake, Morgan, Weber, Tooele, Davis counties, and many of the elected officials who are on this call. And then I also noticed that we have Kaysville City staff on the call, and Wilf Summercorn, who's a planning commission chair. So welcome any involvement or questions or comments from those folks, as well as I talk about this really interesting time as we've been shifted over into public meetings, doing electronic public meetings. So a few of the key takeaways that I wanted to give first is that the public meeting process has been kept whole, in my opinion, with the electronic meetings. Public engagement remains possible and actually may even be higher than in-person meetings in some cases. Staying at home makes people acutely aware of what is happening in their neighborhoods. And I know that I'm personally guilty of that, realizing now that there are dozens of delivery vehicles and Amazon trucks and various things coming through my neighborhood that I just didn't realize what was happening when I was gone to the office 8 to 5. And the last is that decision-making, much like talking to my computer here in a bedroom, is that decision-making without seeing applicants' faces is kind of a strange process. So with those key takeaways, I want to run through a little bit of the technology overview that Kaysville uses. They use a Zoom meeting that is live broadcast on YouTube. The participation for both the applicants and the citizens making comments are verbal comments managed through the raise your hand button. The comment function is disabled in our meetings due to concerns and limited ability to control where that conversation goes. But it also helps limit interruptions and keeps the flow of the meeting moving. So Kaysville being a small city that's really, has a lot of respect for its citizens, has at times during the Planning Commission meetings, just comments jump up out of the audience in the middle of maybe discussion that the Planning Commission meeting has. So in some ways, the electronic meeting format is a more formatted meeting. It keeps that process whole. And then the commenters are also voice only, no video. I think that cities are approaching this differently, but with Kaysville, it's due to concerns that the city isn't able to control what someone puts up on their video feed on their side. So in this case, it's all just, the audio of somebody coming up that's a commenter, making a comment, and then you respond as a Planning Commission meeting or Planning Commissioner. YouTube Live has been a passive function of City Council for Kaysville City since September of 2015. So the city was familiar with this technology. They have been broadcasting live their City Council meetings for that long. And that was view only, and now people are able to participate via comments on Zoom. So it's kind of a hybrid approach of those. And the number one pitfall, as I spoke to Lyle Gibson, our planning director, is that everyone's technology is different. So different microphone issues have been the main problem that they've had to overcome. There's of course lighting and various other things, but as long as people have a decent microphone pickup, then the Planning Commission members, wherever they are, have all been able to be heard. Interesting to me was that there's been no negative feedback received from the public. So participation has also been very good. At the last Planning Commission meeting that we did electronically, there were 40 viewers on YouTube and then 20 people on the Zoom call, and we had almost all of them were commenters on some item of the process that we were looking at. And so for Kaysville, this is an equitable and convenient way to continue the process of city business. And to Christiana's point, according to our planning director, as part of a broadband study that Kaysville found, they found out that approximately 95% of the city is served by home internet. So for our city, and maybe this is tied to your demographics that you have or socioeconomics in your community, but for Kaysville City, we have a very high percentage of the population who has access to home internet. They're able to go on and watch these meetings and participate, in our opinion, pretty equitably in our community to make sure that the process stays whole. And just a note on that decision-making piece, the electronic meeting, it didn't change the way I viewed the items. It didn't change my decision, but it was really strange to only hear from applicants and not see them. And I feel like Planning Commission meetings and City Council meetings are inherently personal and public forums for conversation around really important land use and zoning issues. And so to make these decisions on rezones and subdivision approvals in my home without seeing the neighbors and applicants was strange, but was still functional. And the process is, really the process remains whole. And that's what I mean by that, is that we're able to continue this important city business that needs to happen. We're able to continue processing applications and keep the economy moving in at least that local government way and not stop it due to this social distancing and those concerns. So with that, that's kind of our brief process. We have another Planning Commission meeting tonight. So we'll see what the public participation looks like there. And then for the time being, this is our standard process as we're moving forward. So Kaysville has that pretty dialed in. And if you're interested, you can find the YouTube live feed through a search on YouTube. And if you need to, shoot me an email at shess@wfrc.org, and I'm willing to share that information with you. So thank you, Jordan, for the introduction, and love to field any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Scott. It looks like maybe we'll hold off until after Commissioner Adams, and then we will segue into Q&A. So thank you so much for your perspectives with Kaysville and Planning Commission. Next, we want to segue into more of a rural perspective. So we are excited to have San Juan County Commissioner Bruce Adams on the webinar with us today. So Commissioner Adams was born in Monticello, and he's lived in San Juan County for most of his life, except for when he went away to get an education. He comes from a ranching family, and he was elected county commissioner in November of 2004. He likes all sports and working with cattle and horses. He has 25 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. He loves San Juan County, he loves his family, and he really loves hiking throughout the region. So with that, Commissioner Adams, if you would like to talk about what it's been like for you down in San Juan County.
Well, I feel a little out of place here today because there mainly is city folks here and not as many county folks, but I'm certainly glad to give the perspective of rural Utah. San Juan County is in the southeastern part of Utah, and we border 3 other states, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. We're a large county. In fact, we're the largest in the state of Utah. We are 5 million acres big with a population of 15,000, a little over 15,000 people. Of that 15,000, a little over half are Native American people from the Navajo, Paiute, and Ute tribes that live in our county. That brings some specific challenges to begin with because our technology infrastructure isn't as well developed as most of the rest of you, and especially listening to Scott talk about his infrastructure. We have many, many places in the county where you can't even get cell service on your phone, let alone any other kind of service. Just the past year, UEN has been trying to extend broadband south of Blanding to the schools that are south of Blanding, and most of them are on the reservation. We feel like if we can get broadband down to the southern part of our county, that'll certainly open up some opportunities for Native American people to do their work on the internet. We have 3 municipalities in our county. Monticello is the county seat. Blanding is our largest community in the county, and now Bluff has incorporated, and they are an incorporated city. So as far as the county commission is concerned, we've been trying to follow the rules that have been set up by the governor and our health officer in the county for social distancing and for meetings virtually like we're in today. But we have a real difficult time having a virtual meeting for the county commission because the other 2 commissioners are Native Americans. Willie Gray Eyes lives 4.5 hours by road from Monticello out to Navajo Mountain. Now, to give you a perspective, I can drive to Salt Lake City from Monticello in 4.5 hours. So for him to attend a commission meeting, he usually needs to come to Monticello and stay overnight. And then he's able to attend the next morning. But both he and Commissioner Maryboy have been unable to have anything but some spotty cell phone service for our commission meetings, but we've been able to conduct them, and much the same as Scott was saying, we ask for public participation by email. We don't take questions during our meeting for much of the same reasons, but if people want to ask questions, we allow them to do that by email. But it's a pretty difficult situation technologically in San Juan County. We have broadband here in Monticello and in Blanding, and I think there is now some broadband at Montezuma Creek. And last year, I was able to partner with UEN to get the state of Utah to appropriate $1 million for broadband in San Juan County that triggered a $9 million grant from the federal government to extend broadband to all of the schools in San Juan County. I'll tell you how difficult that is. To get to Navajo Mountain, you have to go into Arizona, to Kay into Arizona. Then about halfway between Kay and Tuba City, there's a road that runs west towards Page. About halfway to Page, you come to a intersection that takes you to north back to Inscription House. Then from Inscription House, you can go to Rainbow City, which is located at Navajo Mountain. That's really the only route that we can take with the broadband, and most of it is on the Navajo reservation. So we had to lobby pretty quickly and fairly intensely the Navajo Nation president to get a right-of-way to put that broadband across the Navajo reservation just to get to the school at Navajo Mountain. I think that school has about 38 students there at the high school. But we are going to get broadband to all of the schools in San Juan County, and we hope that that will allow the chapters to take broadband out to the chapters, and then hopefully there can be a connection made with homes on the reservation so that students have the same opportunity on the reservation and in San Juan School District that students have all over the state of Utah. But we have had some difficulty having our meetings virtually. We've ended up with our county administrator, our county clerk, and myself being able to get on the iPads virtually. And then we talk to the other two commissioners by cell phone. But we are going to come out of the dark ages in San Juan County sometime in the near future, where everybody can also get on their iPad or their computer and talk and have meetings like we are here today. But it's been a challenge, and it's been difficult, but we've been able to adapt and make things happen. I don't know what else you want me to to report on, Jordan.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Commissioner Adams. And it looks like maybe we'll just take this now, Meg, that question that came through from Morgan City.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you all. We'll try to transition here to some Q&A so we can use the chat, but you have the ability, I allowed you all to unmute yourselves. We do have quite a few participants, so I'm not sure this will be a practice test for us virtually to see how we virtually do the Q&A outside the chat box. But the first question we had, Commissioner, was, will San Juan County be using schools at remote locations for public meetings? So I'll let you take that while we see if others come in.
There are some places where we can do that, and there are some places where we cannot. We certainly will be doing that in every location that it's possible for our planning and zoning people, for our road department. we have meetings with all over the state, which is fairly easy, but to have meetings within the county, it's a little more difficult. And we're still challenged because of the lack of infrastructure. But we're doing the best we can, and hopefully we can get back to doing business the way we were last year.
Excellent, thank you. And just curious, I know we have lots of varying sizes of communities, and some of the chat that we've heard on our resource page has been trying to get planning commissioners, council members, other board members to use their own personal equipment and how that functions. I don't know if anyone has anything to offer or add to that, or maybe if I'll see, see if, and I've just lost, I hope, there she is, Christiana. Maybe how did you at Salt Lake City, and maybe Scott, how did you guys deal with that? Do you all use your own computers, or are you enough that you've distributed them to each individual member?
I'll just quickly say that Kaysville distributes an iPad to planning commission members as part of their service on the planning commission. So there's no printing of packets. Everything's electronic that comes to us, and it's part of their way to assure that everybody has access to those packet materials. So that has how most folks are engaging through the meeting, is just through the iPad that the city has provided. Which again, there's a comment in there that that Bruce, your comments should make the rest of us feel grateful, and it absolutely does. I mean, it makes me realize that even we're a suburban community, but we really benefit from that urban fabric, and being a relatively wealthy community, and doing well that way, that it makes me feel really grateful to be able to serve the public that way.
Scott, you shouldn't feel bad, because we've lived under extreme circumstances ever since our ancestors came through the hole in the rock. This is just business as usual for us down here.
Meg, oh, sorry, go ahead, Christiana.
Oh,
We'll chime in after you.
Yeah, you're good. I was just going to say that, yeah, I just want to echo what Scott said. Yeah, I feel very grateful that with Salt Lake City, I mean, I know that most of the workers that I know, we have our work, we were fortunate enough to get our, work computers kind of before everything got as serious as it did, and before the earthquake and everything. So we're fortunate to have that, but I know there are a lot of members of our community that don't have access to computers and internet access. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. But maybe, I'm not sure if Angela can talk more about the kind of the side of it with the council and planning. I'm not sure, I don't think I could speak to that, but yeah, definitely feel fortunate also.
And then after Angela says something, I'm going to take a couple of comments from the chat box. So go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, I was just going to say that just know that if you're using your personal computer for planning commission or city council, or really any of those types of activities, that it's subject to GRAMA, which means that the public can request through the city recorder. If you guys aren't familiar with GRAMA, can request through the city recorder to have emails or texts or access to your computer. So if cities can, it's always encouraged to provide planning commissioners, city councils, members that are participating in boards and conducting those types of activities, to have them conducting those activities on a computer owned by the city.
Excellent. And then, so this is a good technical question, maybe for Christiana or anybody. I was trying to figure this out too. So we're trying to use the chat box. Hopefully all of you have seen that. There also is a way to do a raise your hand, which indicates to the host that you have a question. I don't know that this would be a great way if you were doing a public meeting, but maybe for this type of training. And the question came in is, how do you raise your hand if you're calling in on a phone? So I'll
That's a good question. I'll say I don't know if that is, if you have the ability to do that. I would guess not, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. And then I had a chiming in from Sandy City is using Zoom with the raise the hand option when we give audio permissions. We also allow questions to be submitted by email. This is about for public input, and email by a designated time to be read into the record. And then we also got, thank you, Dwayne. You press *9 to raise your hand over the phone. Oh, someone else says he thinks it's number 6, but I think *9. So if you follow the chat box, we're getting some questions there, which is awesome. Thank you. And then we had another question about what are other folks doing for the protocol of handling live public comments for public hearings. And we've had, Scott has offered his email to follow up with you on that. And then we had Bill has said that they're using Broadcast Live on YouTube and filtering the process and comments on there. Zoom meetings are attended by the planning commissioner and council members, and then residents comment on YouTube. So that's kind of a hybrid. Do any of our speakers want to talk about that live commenting and how's that worked, and maybe any pitfalls? Christiana, I don't know if you have any pitfalls or tips on how you guys have tried to handle that, or what was the best system for you?
Yeah, I can say that I know the Salt Lake City Council. Yeah, I can only really speak about Salt Lake City Council, but they have the call-in feature. So they broadcast on YouTube, and if you go to the council's webpage and pull up the agenda, it has the agenda as well as the live video, or you can just watch it separately live on YouTube. And I believe they take the comments from there, from YouTube, and also from people calling in.
As far as I remember from my conversation with Lyle, we have YouTube comments disabled. So it's all raise your hand and verbal comments through Zoom. And then similarly to Sandy City, emails that come into the city prior to the meeting are read into the meeting minutes as part of the staff presentation prior to each item.
And I think the big thing is patience, right? In practicing with the public and trying to get that communique out there about what that system is, and then just patience during the meeting. I think seems to me. I have a question for the planning commissioners is, how do you deal with this time pause and the interruption? Is your chair pretty much letting each one speak, or is the hand button working for the planning commissioners giving input as well?
It's been the raise the hand button, and then our planning director and the chair, Wilf Summercorn, are able to work together on that hosting to take comments when it's the appropriate time. So it's really a function of, I think, more the public being patient with the planning commission process, that if they have their hand held for a long time raised, that they might need to wait until it's that appropriate time to make a comment. But it's fairly informal. I mean, we're pretty willing to hear from the public at any point. But again, the meeting that we had, that first electronic meeting, wasn't real contentious. So it'd be interesting to see what it would look like under something where we had hundreds of people trying to comment rather than a couple dozen.
Excellent. And then we had some good comments again in the chat box. Thank you so much, talking about how one community does an opening roll call and then a closing one to make sure there were no issues technologically during the meeting. And then a second comment about moving the agenda order around. This is interesting, so that the hearing, public portion hearing of the meeting, I think I'm reading this right, is at the beginning of the meeting. So we leave it open so it gave people enough time to comment. And maybe you can clarify that for me. Any other comments? I think the chat box seems to be working if you have a question or comment, but anyone want to share a pitfall or tip, or have a question for any of our tech experts? We did on the Google resource doc list all the different platforms and some of their costs. Thank you, Jordan. So that if you are looking at what these other options may be for your community, particularly interested from maybe some of the smaller communities we have, if there are questions they may have or impediments that they have come across.
This is Paul Larson from Brigham City.
Okay, Paul, great. We can hear you a little bit.
One thing, I just want to reinforce something that one of you said early on, which was to test your systems, make sure they work before you go to an active meeting. Early on, we were doing some webinars for business outreach with a local economic development group here. And we luckily tested out the system that we were using. I can't remember the name of it, but it had a glitch where every time someone would raise their hand to ask to be recognized, it would kick them out of the system. And luckily we figured out how to deal with that in advance. The webinars went over quite well and successfully, but if we hadn't known that going in, it would have been a disaster. So it's important to know your software, your systems that you're using, and know how to use them and make sure they're functioning correctly.
Thank you, Paul. And I think this is work in progress. And obviously, as we get more information in and resources, we will try to have those on the league. We have a best practices kind of dialogue Q&A website. And we'll obviously keep adding to this. I think we had one more quick comment here about clarifying the meeting agenda, and he was stating there, or she, I can't tell, sorry. If you have the public hearing in the beginning, leave it open for comments to come in various formats. Oh, I get it, right. So this allows for more time for the residents to respond, and then at the end of the meeting, close the public meeting and take a vote. That's creative. I think that works, but we'll let the attorneys figure that one out later. So we, at the league here and on behalf of Utah APA and the Department of Workforce Services, Community Development, really appreciate you guys taking the time. We appreciate what you do. We'll continue to provide resources as we learn to help you navigate this new way of interacting with the public and holding your meetings. We'll end it here. The link will be up on both the APA legislative website as well as the Utah League website. Again, thank you for what you all do. Please stay safe, and we'll all get through this in creative new ways. So thank you for your time. We will end the meeting, and we'll post the recording up later if this serves you in some fashion. Thank you all.